Greeny, you know how to win at business?
Tell me how.
Show up early for meetings. That way everybody who's only on time looks like slackers.
Well, I got a better way to win at business.
What's that?
Instant free nights at La Quinta Inns and Suites. You can show up with no advance reservation and redeem your La Quinta Returns loyalty points for a free night that same night just by using the La Quinta app.
I feel like I'd win at business more than you.
I'd cream you at business.
Impossible. I'm undefeated at business.
Go to LQ.com now and prepare to win at business. We've got Grill Golic Jr. trending. Hashtag Grill Golic Jr. with questions all over the place, and we'll continue with those as the morning goes. And one of them was about movies, and I want to get to all the sports here in a second. But just we mentioned Hoosiers, and you sort of played me by telling me that you thought it was overrated just to get my dander up.
Oh, yeah.
And it worked.
Mission accomplished.
My dander was very much up.
Your dander was at full attention.
And then you acknowledged that you'd actually never seen it and you were just playing me. In 2012, the LA Times rated Hoosiers the best sports movie of all time, decided by vote, and Rocky finished number 2. Well, why do you have that look on your face? If you've never seen it, you cannot weigh in.
I get it, but I have enough people I trust who have given me reviews on Hoosiers that are less than stellar. And I mean, I just putting Rocky as the second, because I've told you what I think. I don't think Rocky's a bad movie. I just think it falls short of the other Rockies that people choose to downgrade because the first one got it nominated for an Academy Award and Sylvester Stallone did this and that in it. Like, I don't go to those movies to watch Sly Stallone act. I go to there to watch him get punched in the face, fight with his hands down, and somehow stave off concussions.
My friend Bill Wolf tweeted or texted me, best football movie ever is North Dallas 40. Now, that's way before your time, but have you seen that?
I haven't seen North Dallas 40.
That's a great movie. It may be very dated now. It's from the 70s, but your dad has told me many times that he thinks it's the most realistic football movie he ever saw. And it's the one that has the famous line, every time I say it's a job, you say it's every time I say it's a game, you say it's a business, and every time I say it's a business, you say it's a game, which is one of the great lines in any sports movie ever. North Dallas 40 is a great, I haven't seen it in years. It may be very dated now, but that's a great football movie.
Yeah, that's the hard part, and that's why I almost go for the more ironic football movies, because you're used to, as a player, looking at all of the unrealistic action and having to kind of roll your eyes and basically suspend disbelief for a while. So if I'm going to do that, I want to go full tilt. That's why when you watch the program, you'll understand, because it's basically a caricature of a college football program. It's insane.
All right, I've never seen that one. I'll watch that. You watch North Dallas 40 and Hoosiers, and we'll see where we wind up. Mike and Mike, let's do next question. It's brought to you by Indeed.com. Post your next job opening on the world's #1 job site. The staff has put together a bunch of questions for us. Junior, let's see how we do. Number 1, by the end of NBA free agency, how many super teams will there be?
So if we're already counting Golden State and Cleveland as super teams,
correct,
I'd say you add Houston to the mix.
That's it.
Three. That's it. I'd say there'll just be 3 by the end of this one, because it seems like we lost out on the chance for the Spurs to have a legitimate claim to that with Chris Paul going.
See, the Spurs are not a super team. They're a super team, but they're not a super team by my definition of it, because they didn't come together through the construct that this was. This was not a trade of Chris Paul, make it clear. While the transaction says trade, this was Chris Paul working his way where he wanted to go, knowing how to game the system. He's the president of the NBA Players Association. As you pointed out, he knew exactly how to work this out. And again, he will have the opportunity to be free next summer. LeBron will have the opportunity to be free next summer. Wade will have the opportunity to be free next summer. And Carmelo Anthony could have the opportunity to be free next summer. My prediction is you will see the 4 of them together somewhere in 2018.
And I can't wait. We've talked about how interesting this NBA offseason is. Think about it with those names all of a sudden. We're going from the B to the full A-plus team next summer when we hit that level of free agency.
Next question. The best backcourt in the NBA is?
Listen, I still don't know how you don't go with Golden State and what they've got there, just because those pieces fit together. To keep using the puzzle analogy, you've got guys that complement each other really well. So I'd go that. And then I know you've called him this all the time, but LeBron James is essentially a point guard. I would count him and Kyrie as a backcourt in my mind and say that would probably be my 1B.
If you're including LeBron and Kyrie, I'd make them 1. The question obviously stems from now with Chris Paul and James Harden together. How do you compare that to Steph and Clay? I mean, if you're doing it, if you're drafting amongst those four players, I think your answer is the right one because we've seen those guys in Golden State play together. We haven't seen the guys in Houston play together, and let's see how they fit together. But if you were drafting amongst the four of them, you could start a team with any of the four of them. Which one do you take first?
Any of the four of, if I can have any of the four of those guys, I'd start with Steph.
You would start with Steph?
Yes.
Over Harden?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think I would too. I think I will stay with Golden State. All right, next question. The best place for Blake Griffin to sign is?
I would say back in LA at this point, just because you can get the most. I mean, they're saying that it's probably going to take that 5-year max deal to keep him in LA, and I just don't know where else you fit in right now that's going to be able to make the moves that would absolutely need you at this point.
The one I'd love to see, I'm going to make a selfish answer to this question, and I'm going to say Oklahoma City. He's from Oklahoma. He went to Oklahoma. That would be a homecoming for him, and I'd like to see Russell Westbrook get someone in there that will give him a legitimate chance, to take it to another level rather than Russell Westbrook having to make a decision between getting all the money or winning. You know, I mean, the NBA is better if Russell Westbrook is in OKC. And in my opinion, now maybe he stays there anyway, but if he wants to have a legitimate shot to win, he needs help. And I would love to see Blake Griffin be that help.
And I'd be very interested. I've heard a lot of people comment on this. How does Russ's mindset change off of getting that individual accolade, getting that recognition in a way that was only going to happen sans Kevin Durant in Oklahoma City? Does he now get up on the table and say, all right, we did this. I got to Supernova for a year. Let's try and make this team something competitive, because when it got to the real portion of the season, when we got to the playoffs, it was anything but.
Next question. If you replaced Phil Jackson as the man in charge of the Knicks, what would your first move be?
You'd have to figure out some way to get your owner to buy in on that Carmelo Anthony buyout and really commit to moving this forward, centered around Kristaps Porzingis. He is emblematic of what you want in today's NBA, and especially today's NBA big. And between that and Ntilikina and maybe some of the young pieces, if you can get in that mode that the 76ers and the Timberwolves were in the last couple of years, where you're pooling this talent together and you're looking off into the not-so-distant future, I think that's best-case scenario.
I think what I would do is I would call Carmelo Anthony and I'd say, let's go to dinner. And I would say, listen, I get it. I get that all the stuff that has happened here. I get your frustration. Is there a way? I want to do this because the God's honest truth is it is better for my franchise, and as a basketball player, is better for you if we figure out a way to make a trade that you want. So you tell me, help you, to quote Tom Cruise and Jerry Maguire. If you tell me you don't like that movie, we're going to have an issue here.
Come on, everyone likes Jerry Maguire.
Okay. Everyone likes Hoosiers, too. But anyway, the point is, that's what I would do. I would say, Carmelo, help me help you. It is better for your career if you accept a trade. You tell me what you'll take. I need it. I believe it will be better for you. I'm not doing this as your adversary. I'm doing this because we can work together on something that is mutually beneficial. Your owner's not buying him out. Your owner's not giving him $54 million, and he's not taking 53. So you've got to figure out a way to convince him to accept a trade.
And you've got to be willing to take a bath on it. And that's something I don't think Phil was willing to do, was take losing Carmelo at a loss. And I think you've got to be willing to do that right now. Undercut yourself a little bit in the short term, understanding that it just gives you freedom for everything else.
There's no bigger loss than just giving him $54 million and letting him walk away. Anything you get back is something. Now, if you start making a trade, you will get involved in having to bring back cap space and all that. I understand that part of the debate. I guess that's a long-winded way of saying the first thing you got to do is figure out a way to get rid of Carmelo Anthony, and not in a malicious way, but in an understanding way. Final question: true or false? Miguel Montero's release will turn around the Cubs season.
False. I don't think you can listen. You're not going to point to one thing right there. And I know, especially as we get towards the All-Star break, there people are looking for something to turn what has been a really mediocre season for the Cubs around. But I don't think just removing that one situation is the energizer jetpack that you
something
need.
That kind of galvanizes the troops. I think what's going to happen is the Cubs are too good to keep playing this way. They're going to get red hot at some point here, and if it happens to be really soon, people will point to this incident and. Like, they'll take the result. What's that called? It's like the causality that they'll pretend that this was the reason why. I don't think it'll actually have anything to do with it at all. The Cubs are just too good to keep playing this badly.
They'll make correlation causality, and you're right. It'll just be confirming what everyone wants to believe right now, because that's what we like about sports. We like neat little stories like
that. Is Next Question with Mike and Mike, and it's brought to you by Indeed.com. Another reminder, Saturday night on ESPN and ESPN Deportes and on the ESPN app, the Battle of Brisbane, Manny Pacquiao defending his WBO welterweight title live, aiming for his 60th career win against Australia's undefeated #1 world-rated contender, Jeff Horn. Again, it's Saturday night, 10 Eastern. The coverage, I believe, starts 9 Eastern, exclusively on ESPN and on Deportes and on the ESPN app. And I want to pick a quick moment up on the conversation we had in our previous hour about that with Teddy Atlas, about the significance of this. What I'm about to say is probably extraordinarily obvious, but it's just something that if you're not in the sports industry and you're just a sports fan, you would never stop to think about, right? Every sport has its hardcore fans. Boxing has its diehard, dyed-in-the-wool fans. Football has hardcore fans. Basketball, hockey, all of them. The sports that make it to another level in this country are the ones who attract people who are not hardcore fans. No one has done that better than football. And football has a variety of built-in advantages. Right? They have 8 million different things. Forever it was gambling. Now you add in fantasy, which is another layer of gambling, and other factors. Basketball has done a magnificent job of expanding beyond people who just enjoy the game of basketball by marketing its superstars. And David Stern, to me, gets more credit for that than anybody. Magic and Larry and Michael are the guys that he built it on, but someone had to figure out to do that. And someone had to take basketball from something that used to be on the NBA Finals, used to be on tape delay after your late local news.
That was one of the more mind-blowing portions of that 30 for 30 for me.
I remember it like it was yesterday. You knew exactly when not to put the TV on because you didn't want to know what happened in the game before you actually had a chance to watch it. So David Stern was the one, and the people in the offices at the time, who figured out we're gonna build this thing on star power, and they did a brilliant job. And look at where the NBA is now. So boxing continues to be a sport that has its share of diehard fans, and then every once in a while, this is exactly the point Teddy was making. You get this super fight, and everyone is interested in that, but you put it on pay-per-view. And so a lot of people who might be interested in that won't watch it. They don't have the money to spend, or they're not willing to spend the money, or whatever it is. And there's never any other occasion, more significantly, there's never any other occasion, or very few, where people are going to be interested in seeing a fight. There are fights, obviously, on HBO and things like that regularly, but the marquee names in the sport almost only fight in ways that they're making you work to get it. You're making you put in effort and time and energy and money.
You've got to plan well in advance for how am I going to consume this product.
And it's gone that way for 20 years. So what they've done is they've never created they are alienating, or they're not attracting casual fans. So growing up, I was a casual boxing fan. I don't know that the sport of boxing necessarily appeals to me in the same way that basketball and football do, but the fight was on. They were names. It was there. I watched. I was into it. But if you had told me then, you got to go to a whole bunch of energy and effort and time and money to watch this, I wouldn't have. My kids, my son in particular, is a crazy sports fan. He didn't want to watch. He doesn't even know about boxing. It's not even on his radar because it's never been available to him. And then the one fight, to Teddy's point, that he was kind of interested in watching because everyone was talking about it. We bought Mayweather-Pacquiao, and we in the middle of it, he said, Dad, this is awful.
Oh, it was a complete dud.
Insanely boring. So this, and I'm sorry to keep interrupting you, but I'll just finish my thought, is that this thing being on ESPN Saturday night, again, I know I'm going to sound like I'm a company man, fine. Say it if you want to. This is an opportunity for people who are to go to comparatively no effort and not spend any extra money to watch this thing. And so hopefully you get some casual fans, because I myself would love to see boxing reascend to a similar place to where it was in my childhood.
Yeah, and the thing I'd say is you're right. You need a few marquee fights to hit in a way that, as much as we looked forward to Mayweather-Pacquiao, it just didn't deliver. That one didn't feel worth the price of admission. So you need that. But also, I think something that Teddy mentioned that was interesting to me, and I know we overestimated the population of Australia a little bit as far as who would be watching and supporting that fight. But the point still remains that there's a lot of nationalism behind both of those guys. There's a lot of patriotism fueling both those guys. And I've said in the world of soccer, because we sit around and wait every World Cup and Olympics, what's it going to take for soccer to take hold in America? And I've always said homegrown American superstar would be a good place to start. And I think boxing could use some of that, because you've got Floyd, who's going to go down as pound for pound one of the best fighters of all time, but he's a reprehensible human being. And so it's hard, especially now, to your point, where we're so acutely aware of that stuff, to get behind that guy fully and truly in a way that it seems like these countries can get behind their fighters in moments like this. And so I think having that guy would help in this current day and age, in this social climate. Having a guy who people can identify with and root for because he's from here is always an easy place to start. It's easy to root for red, white, and blue when it comes up, but then he's also got to be someone that doesn't have despicable acts outside of the ring that just make it impossible for people to feel good about rooting for.
It's an excellent point, and especially if it is an international fight. So if you have a big American star fighter who's fighting someone who isn't American, now all of a sudden you jump on board with that in a bigger way.
Yeah, because listen, boxing is conflict at its core, at the very essence of the sport, and that's another easy way to manufacture that sort of conflict, is us against them. And as international as the sport of boxing is, where we've got, guys from the Philippines and Australia fighting each other and all across the map here, I think that's an easy place to start. Now, easy saying that it's a simple idea, it's difficult to execute, but it still, to me, is a beginning. It doesn't take you all the way, because to your point, we also live in an age where people my age, we have instant access to a lot of things. And while the a la carte model of a pay-for-view fight is appealing, it's more expensive than we're willing to pay. We're paying $7 a month for Netflix and things like that. So you can pick and choose for a very bargain bin price. And until boxing and really all sports find a way to adjust to that in the coming new world order of television, it's going to be working an uphill battle.
Yeah, the international, the American versus is basically the plot of Rocky IV.
Yeah.
And then the growth, the enormous and rapid and somewhat stunning growth of MMA in this country is something that I've followed with interest, because it is also not a sport that intrinsically appeals to me. It just, sometimes when I'm watching it, I find myself almost looking away. And so I was kind of late to the party on this thing, and I will confess that I really have only gotten myself educated into it and involved in it because I recognize that for my job I have to. This is something that has now become, it was like the fringe, and it's not that anymore. It is mainstream enough now that we have to cover it on shows like this, and so I am paying attention to it now. And so when you watch the growth of that, there's an audience out there for this stuff. There is an audience that wants to see it, and I believe there's an audience out there that will discover the beauty of boxing. There's a beauty in boxing. I'm not suggesting there isn't in MMA, but there's sort of there's an artistry in boxing that I think is different, if nothing else, maybe only because I'm more accustomed to it, that I hope people will find appealing this weekend. I get nothing from boxing growing again, and makes no difference really to me in any way, except that I kind of like it and I would like to see it happen.
Boxing's one of those sports that gets romanticized because of its storied history. The thing I wonder is, especially now, again, talking about the world we live in, is if there's a room for that level of brutality, because we already see a pushback on it in the sport of football in a lot of different ways, whether it's the concussion lawsuits and everything that's come down from that and rule changes or what have you. The fact that we used to have Jacked Up as a segment on here that we can no longer run because people see those hits now and see their favorite stars struggling after football. And I'm wondering if that's something that at its core boxing can overcome and get back close to where it was, just because I don't know if the appetite for it is as there as it used to be.
Good question. We're Mike and Mike. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. Jeff Van Gundy will join us in a few minutes on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. A very quick reminder that tonight on ABC, we are bringing back Battle of the Network Stars, and I had the wonderful privilege of co-hosting that show with Joe Tessitore, and Carrie Champion and Cassidy Hubbard from ESPN are on it, and Ronda Rousey and DeMarcus Ware are the coaches of the teams, and we have great stars in the first episode. The debut is tonight, 9 Eastern, 8 Central on ABC. We've got current stars like Corbin Blue and AJ Michalka from the Goldbergs and Luke from Modern Family and others like that, and then we have stars from battles past, if you will, Blair and Tootie from Facts of Life, and Dave Coulier and Joey Lawrence and Tom Arnold and many others. So there's a little something for everybody there, and I hope that you will like it. I had so much fun doing it. They let me wear the legendary Howard Cosell mustard blazer, which was the thrill of a lifetime. So it's Battle of the Network Stars tonight, 9 Eastern, 8 Central on ABC.
I'm looking forward to my introduction to it. As I mentioned, I was part of the generation that missed that first iteration of it. So congratulations on becoming the original in the eyes of everyone basically 27 and younger.
Yeah, it is. It was fun. Your dad loved loved it. I loved it. So hopefully you'll like it. It's tonight. It's on ABC. Grill Golic Jr. is trending right now. Hashtag Grill Golic JR. And there are a couple here I want to read to you. First off, from Lisa, because we were talking about how you're single and you're in Central Connecticut and your hair is,
It's like a bad fairway.
I actually think that, you get a free drop, from your head.
Yeah, no, it might be considered a hazard.
But Lisa writes, I think he's smart and funny and adorable.
What's up?
What's
up?
What's up, Lisa Abada Marco? Or I don't know.
It's about to be going on a date with me. Hey.
It's possible. You can add her if you want to. I've got it right here. Next one.
At me. DMs are open for sliding, ladies.
Next one. Carlos, if you had to eat food from only one restaurant for a week, what restaurant would it be?
One restaurant for a week.
I'll accept a genre. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a specific restaurant, but I'll accept a style of food if you wish.
You know what? I'm all for pushing the limits of the human condition, and because it's trending right now, I think it's a cool tie-in why I'm banned from Arby's. I'd go Arby's for a week. See what a human body responds to if it's going for a week straight on drinking horsey sauce by the gallon and having nothing but roast beef and buttered bread. Sounds like a challenge that I'm up for. Uniquely, I have a cast iron stomach. This thing can absorb pretty much anything going, and I feel like Arby's is that outlier. Can I accomplish this?
If that contest doesn't have Golic written all over it, I don't know what does. Tyrone writes, if you were a WWE wrestler, what would be your entrance song?
I thought about this one, and I feel like you have to go the slight ironic play. Hit the music. Uh-huh. Two places you never been. Oh, yeah, see? It's got the slow build right here. Is this the piano version? Uh-huh. Just wait for the hit right here. This is when the smoke would come. Get that build. Do it to him, Taylor. Smoke. Laser light show, me, shirtless. Really, like borderline man thong going on, high leather boots. I'd go some sort of war paint on my face. I mean, just dressed to the nines. And then maybe I can get Stone Cold to come out, too, with the beer truck. Would love to see that. Would love to see that. That's an image. Take that home with you.
We will have my version of my walk-up music coming up, and we'll continue with the Grill Golic Jr., but we have a few minutes here with Jeff Van Gundy, and I don't want to waste a second as we dive into all of this NBA offseason action. Jeff, it's Mike and Mike Golic Jr. this morning. How are you?
Doing well.
Good. So are the Rockets at this point as they manufacture the deal, and clearly this is what Chris Paul wanted, and this is what Mike D'Antoni gets. And you make your home in Houston, so you obviously see them more often than you see, I guess pretty much anybody. So put James Harden and Chris Paul in the backcourt together for me. How does it work?
It's a good question. I think there is going to be a period of adjustment for both. I think Mike D'Antoni's got to convince Chris Paul to shoot the three more off the catch when he's playing in a spot-up position as Harden has the ball, and to get the ball up a little bit quicker when he's the one who has the ball. And I think Harden's going to have to get used to some reduced time with the ball. And I think it's going to be an adjustment for both players. I think it'll be interesting. I'm not sure it'll necessarily translate into more regular season wins as far as I don't think you're going to see him jump from 55 to 65, but I think they'll make a good improvement in the regular season. But what I think it poises them to do is be better in the playoffs, particularly when Harden's out of the game and when Harden is in a struggle like he was last year when they ended their season at home against San Antonio. So I think it really helps them have a better chance in the playoffs to match up against the great teams in the West.
Jeff, so far this offseason, Paul George has led the league in Photoshop jerseys on the internet. And I'm just wondering, now we hear him linked to this new iteration of the Rockets. We've heard him talked about in Cleveland and Boston. Which team in your mind would get the biggest lift and maybe have the best potential to challenge Golden State by adding Paul George?
The Detroit Pistons. That's who I want to see him go to. No, I think Boston, obviously, they're going to be players because I think teams see them or players see them as a group that if they can stay together, could be a great, great team on par with anybody else in the East. And so I think I don't know who Boston would rather have, if they would be Gordon Hayward or Paul George. Probably Hayward, I'd say, because all they have to give up for him is cap room. But I think Paul George is still, as good as he is, he's underrated. I don't think people understand just what a weapon he is at both ends of the floor. To be able to match up and go head-to-head against the best small forwards in the league, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, those types, I think Boston would be hugely benefited by his two-way brilliance.
Mike and Mike, Jeff Van Gundy is with us. And for anyone who didn't get the reference he made at the beginning there, Jeff's brother Stan is the man in charge of the Pistons. I'm just curious, Jeff, you know, you've been at this a really long time. We are now in a place where the big stars in the sport, not only do they move around as frequently as they do, but they are smart enough to have figured out that they can keep all kinds of pressure and leverage on the franchises, that even the ones they're playing for, by maintaining all of these options. Chris Paul's in Houston, but he doesn't have to stay more than 1 year. LeBron James has an out after next season. Dwayne Wade could be free next year. Carmelo Anthony, if he chooses to, could be free next year. So we're sitting here speculating about the four of those guys playing together. But from the standpoint of an organization and a coach, how does it change everything when these guys not only have the power they wield because they're stars, but also maintain that leverage because they could walk away from you almost any time they want?
Well, I think for the organizations that care deeply about winning, it's not a bad thing because these guys want to win, and they want you to try to get as great a players as you can to put together. I think for ownership, you see in some of these teams are going to pay massive tax bills down the line, what Golden State's paying, what Cleveland has paid in the past. And so from an ownership standpoint, if you're in the business for profits and profit margin and you don't want to pay the tax, it's going to be hard because you're probably not going to win at the championship level now if you're not willing to pay the tax on occasion or in some cases all the time. And so, yeah, they do have leverage. They're wielding it. I don't know if this type of grouping team guys, great superstars together, is good for the league or bad for the league, but it doesn't really matter because it is what the league is going to be for the foreseeable future.
Jeff, when you look at some of the teams just on the cusp of maybe joining at least the competitive groups, the young groups like the 76ers and the Timberwolves, is there one in particular that you would bet on for maybe the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years that you think could grow into something resembling a competitive team in this league that could maybe get to that upper echelon?
I love Minnesota. I think they went from nurturing these younger players to making a bold move for Jimmy Butler, and now they still have improvements to make along the way. The biggest improvement Minnesota has to make is they have to get Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins from being young, talented offensive players to young, determined two-way players. Defensively, they have a long way to go, and their offensive skill and talent is not questioned, but they've got to bring to the game the mentality that Butler does to play at both ends, because Butler came into the league a lot different than those two number one picks. He came in as the last pick in the first round, had to fight for minutes in his rookie year on a good team, and had to do it to get on the floor to improve offensively. He had to first get out there and defend and rebound and play a supporting role. So I think Towns and Wiggins would do themselves and their team a lot of good is if they tried to take on that same bulldog mentality at the defensive end that Jimmy Butler has. And if they do, they're going to be very, very formidable.
Mike and Mike, Jeff Van Gundy. On the opposite end of the spectrum, the New York Knicks, who have been struggling candidly since the day you left, and now Phil Jackson is gone. What is your reaction to what happened there with Phil?
Yeah, it's too bad because this is a guy who's had a very storied career for so very, very long. in the NBA, both as first as a role player on championship teams in New York to the great successes he had in both Chicago and L.A. With those dominant teams. So it's too bad, and I never like to see anybody lose their job. I think he's at peace with it. I think he did the best thing he could do, and I think New Yorkers are going to remember him for a long time because of the drafting of Porzingis. I think also Hernan Gomez was a good pickup. So I think the record is what the record is, but I think they have to also remember that Phil Jackson did some very good things there. And I think going forward, I think what it allows them to do, Mike, is Jeff Hornacek can now sort of play however he wants to play. I think the shackles are off. I don't think he has to conform to any preconceived notion of the best way to play with the talent at hand. He can determine that, and I think that's going to allow him to be the best coach he can be. And, hopefully they find some continuity, some chemistry together, whichever direction Mr. Dolan decides to go, so that they can get back to being a competitive team.
We'll see. See how close they can get and how quickly they can get there. Jeff, it's great to talk to you again. Every time I say have a great summer, things keep happening that require us to call you. So I have a suspicion we'll talk in the next day or two. But one way or another, thanks very much as always.
All right, take care, guys.
It's Jeff Van Gundy with us again. We sort of wrap things up with him after the draft, and I figured that's going to be that. And then the action comes fast and furious. The NBA offseason is infinitely more interesting than the NBA regular season. It just is.
You keep waiting for it to let up and give way to the NFL, but they're not ready to loosen the grip at this point, and I'm all for it. Keep dropping these Woj bombs.
You're listening to Love Advice with Leanne. Caller, you're on the air.
Hi, Leanne. Longtime listener, first-time caller. Why, in your professional opinion, do you never take my calls off the air?
Is this Carl?
Yep, it's Carl. I mean, we had a few dates. Everything was great. I thought,
Well, when you switch to Geico, you could save a lot of money on car insurance.
Okay, awesome.
You should call them.
I will.
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
A few more tweets here. Hashtag Grill Golic Jr. This one comes from @Sid Golic, which is your younger sister. And she tweets, who do you love more, me or Jake? Which, to be clear for those who don't know, is
My
your younger
siblings.
brother.
Yep, my siblings. Ask me to choose my favorite Golic sibling, I'd probably have to go with Stugatz.
With Stu Gotts.
Yeah, he's a Golic now.
He is a Golic.
We made him
now.
eat a picture of our Christmas card. He's a Golic. I'll go with him.
Is that right?
Yeah, no, sorry, Jake and Sid.
How is this going to play now, at home?
Probably not well. I'm the best man at my brother's wedding coming up in a couple of weeks. My sister's the maid of honor, so we're very closely tied in all this. They've been my best friends for a long time, but I found a better one. Sorry.
Okay, that's a good answer. Rachel tweets, how do you feel about salad with fruit in it?
It's an abomination. It's an abomination. Pretty much fruit in any place where it shouldn't be like that. Salad, dessert. It has no place in polite society. I won't stand for it. If I have one petty hill to die on, it would probably be no fruit in my salad, no fruit in my dessert.
Okay. I like that. And then I want to go back to the WWE one because you got raised a lot of eyebrows when you suggested your WWE entrance song would be Taylor Swift. I'll play you what my WWE entrance song is, and it serves a dual purpose.
Feels good.
This is Bruno Mars' Runaway Baby. I love this song, so I do Soul Cycle with my daughter. And someday you'll discover this. When you have a 16-year-old daughter, anything she wants to do with you, you're in. All right? I mean, because she has so many other things that she's going on. So this is sort of our thing that we do together. So we do a lot of Soul Cycle. And the instructor played, that was the first song out of the chute when we went 2 weekends ago now.
That'll get the blood going.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
So I immediately went up to him at the end of the class and I said, what song was that? And I put it on every one of my cardio playlists. So I love the song. B, I love Bruno Mars. Of all the current artists, I would say he's my favorite.
Okay, he's got the juice.
And then thirdly, and maybe most importantly, it is a perfectly accurate description of what I would do in this ring. I would run away, baby. I mean, if there's a fight going on here, particularly if I'm getting paid by the second, I'm just going to run away, baby, because I'm not here for the fight.
No, it's the only defense you have. You asked me before, who would I rather fight between Floyd Mayweather or Conor McGregor? The answer for you should be neither. It should be no one, because any fight that exists on earth. Will Cain just walked into the studio right now, and you guys very comparable, like great hair, good smile, little 5 o'clock shadow on both. I think Will would absolutely wipe the floor with you.
Oh, I agree.
It would be a mercy killing.
I
would feel uncomfortable watching that. That would be like something illegal in international waters.
See,
there we go. He's saying, come on over here. Let's do it.
See, this is the difference between him and you and me and basically everybody and me. I don't pretend I could fight anyone. I don't want to fight anyone. I acknowledge almost anyone would probably beat me up. I don't even know how to fight. I did boxing for a little while as a training. You know, you train with, and it is the best cardio. I mean, it's the best workout I think I've ever done. It's exhausting. I never realized this. Just stand with your hands in front of your face for 3 minutes and do nothing else.
Brutal.
And you're tired. So, and then when you're throwing punches and all that, it's great. I can't fathom doing it with someone throwing punches at me. I mean, that would be out of the question. I would love boxing if no one was trying to hit me. If the whole game was just me trying to hit someone else and them just trying to make me miss, kind of the way Floyd Mayweather fights and not bothering to throw punches back, I could see myself doing that. Once we're in a fight, you've lost me. I have no interest in doing it.
And you know what? Honestly, I know it's been brought up before of trying to find how far down the list we have to go to find a fighting partner for you.
Yeah.
I'd rather figure out what we need to add to you to make it an even fight. Sort of like on Le Batard show where they do, could you beat a tiger with a chainsaw in the octagon?
Right.
What weapon what's the least mortally effective weapon we could give you to make you viable in a fight? Like we mentioned that with the zombie apocalypse before. Would a sword be enough? Could we downgrade it to just maybe a knife? Yes.
Well, who am I fighting?
God, you know what? Well, have you fight my sister? Actually, no, that's not fair either.
No,
Sydney would kill you within seconds. But
absolutely.
I'm trying to think. We'll figure out a comparable fight partner, but I want to figure out
there is no comparable fight partner.
I'd say just like a base level human being.
Stu Gatz.
Yeah, we'll have you fight Stu Gatz.
I think I could fight Stu Gatz. I don't think Stu Gatz is tough either. But you know what he is? He's devious.
I think exactly. He's underhanded. Like Stu Gatz would stop at nothing.
He has there's a certain level of evil underneath all of that, I think, with Stu Gatz that would come out in that moment, and then I think I would be lost like crazy.
Entry into the Stu Gatz School of Fraudcasting is a piece of your soul, and he gave that up a long time ago, so he's willing to use dark magic to beat you.
It's time for Straight Talk now. Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts. Your sister has now tweeted, blocked, at Mike Golic Jr. 57. So we've now created discord. I mean, genuine disharmony within the Golic family.
Yeah, listen, I told you, I'm an agent of chaos. That's what I do, and so as much as this probably doesn't make my mom happy because now she's going to have to pick up the pieces, it has made Stu Gatz happy, so much so that he's agreed to go in with me on the Arby's challenge.
Yeah, give me this again. You're going to do nothing but eat Arby's for a week?
So, yeah, we're trying to negotiate this. So Stu Gatz and I do weekend observations on Sunday mornings, and we thought it'd be a cool idea to eat nothing but Arby's for a week. Make it the Arby's challenge. Nothing but horsey sauce and roast beef for an entire week and see if our hearts, whatever other organs, somewhere along the way, an organ's just going to slide out. Like, there's no hope.
Like, the fascinating part of that would be to see how long the recovery from that is. Like, what would there be lasting damage? Would you just feel lousy while it was going on? Like, by the second or third day of that, you're not going to feel great. By the fifth or sixth day of that, you're going to be all you can do to get out of bed in the morning. But would it be one of those things where, like, 2 days after it's over and your system has been flushed of it, you'd be just fine again, or would it create some kind of lasting damage?
Oh, no, I think we're talking long-term health problems.
Yeah.
Which I'm willing to accept. At this point, I've done that kind of food damage to my body already. What's a little more on top?
All right, Straight Talk Wireless, nationwide coverage on America's largest and most dependable 4G LTE networks. Will Cain is actually here, and there's a million things to talk about with him, and we'll do that coming up next. Fascinating time in the NBA with really significant moves being made. We got to the bottom of the question, are the Houston Rockets now a significant threat to win the NBA championship? And maybe an even bigger question, will Chris Paul be one and done with the Rockets?
Greeny, you know how to win at business?
Tell me how.
Show up early for meetings. That way everybody who's only on time looks like slackers.
Well, I got a better way to win at business.
What's that?
Instant free nights at La Quinta Inns and Suites. You can show up with no advance reservation and redeem your La Quinta Returns loyalty points for a free night that same night just by using the La Quinta app.
I feel like I'd win at business more than you.
I'd cream you at business.
Impossible. I'm undefeated at business.
Go to LQ.com now and prepare to win at business. It is our pleasure to welcome Will Cain into the conversation. He's always good for the chaos. I mean, Mike Golic Jr. has made it his goal today to provide just chaotic energy in the program. And, Will, that's sort of your middle name.
That's my game. I'm here. Let's do it. Let me start yelling at you, Golic?
Every time I see you and it's not with the willpower, smoke, and signage that you get on First Take, I feel like I've been cheated personally.
Me too. I mean, I was wondering where my smoke was just now.
I figured that was written into the deal.
Me too. I was going to do a LeVar Ball walk, go through the smoke, have you guess, is Will having a seizure or is he doing a LeVar Ball walk? And you wouldn't. I'm not sure you'd be able to tell the difference.
I can speak to someone who saw this. Of you actually coming into the room, like, this isn't a joke. Art imitates life, and Will Cain actually, LeVar Ball, sauntered into the room here, and I was able to mildly pick it out, but you're right. It was between that and calling 911. It was between a laugh and fearing for your life.
All right, Cain is here. Let's start with the big sports news of the day, and then we'll work ourselves to other things. When you first heard Chris Paul had engineered his way, and again, let's make this very clear, the transaction says trade, but this was not a trade. This was Chris Paul dictating where he wanted to go every bit as much as he would have had he been a free agent. So he goes to Houston to team with James Harden. When you first heard that, what was the first thought that went from your mind from a basketball standpoint?
Well, whoa. Can I just leave out from the basketball standpoint for one moment? Because yesterday I was sitting on First Take, and I'm having some kind of, as you said, chaotic yelling match with either Max Kellerman or John Sally or Stephen A. Smith, someone I like to yell with.
Right.
And Cassidy Hubbarth writes something down on a piece of paper and passes it over to me. And, I mean, the message is essentially stop talking, be quiet, right? But what the words actually said were Chris Paul traded. So what was the first thought that went through my mind at that moment? Why? Why would Chris Paul ever allow himself to be traded? What's in it for him? I get what would be in it for the Rockets. I get what would be in it for the Clippers. But for Chris, I was like 4 or 5 days, and he's a free agent. And 4 or 5 days, he can pick wherever he wants to go. Why does this make sense for Chris? That's real time on TV as somebody's passing you the note. It took not long after that to realize, as you guys have been talking about, Chris is an utter maestro. I mean, he just pulled every puppet string on this entire deal to get all the money he would have gotten if he stayed with the Clippers, give himself more optionality on whatever team he wants to play with from a year from now, and have a year of experiment with James Harden. It's just an amazing masterpiece of off-season maneuvering by Chris Paul.
Agreed. And again, he's the president of the Players Association, so if anyone knows how to do it, he knows how to do it. Before we get to next year, what do you expect from them this year? Chris Paul, James Harden together, great or a disaster?
Oh, do I have to pick between those two?
Well,
only those two options.
If it's only okay, then that's not interesting. Will they? Here's the way I phrased the question to Golic Jr. earlier this morning. Two things can come together and either increase in the way of addition, it's 1 + 1, or they can increase in the way of multiplication. It's 100 times 100. Is this 100 plus 100, or is it 100 times 100?
God, I like that so much better than great versus awful. Because I heard you this morning, Greeny, and I agree 100%. The way I would put it is this. I fear that Chris Paul plus James Harden is that the sum is less than the components of the parts. Those two guys together add up to less than they do when they are apart. James Harden was unlocked last year, 7 assists to 11 assists. That unlocked the Houston Rockets from 41 wins to 55 wins. And that happened with him being the primary ball handler and distributor. Now, I can't imagine a scenario where that's not Chris Paul. I mean, I just assume that goes to Chris Paul's hands. And so you're changing James Harden's role. You always trade for talent in the NBA. We know you have to do this deal. Daryl Morey has to do this deal. But I am worried that it doesn't add up to the fantasy basketball team we all want it to be.
You agree or disagree, Golic Jr.?
I agree. That was sort of why I likened it to just jamming puzzle pieces together this morning. The drunk toddler that we've made not drunk retroactively, but it's trying to take the best things available and make them work together. But this is like giving the Frankenstein monster of NBA teams that you're trying to build two heads. It might look great; they're two great heads, but they don't really help you as much on the basketball court because it's not complementary skill sets. James Harden can be a shooting guard. We've seen it before, but to Will's point, we know he's so much better. He's the runner-up for the MVP this year, and you're really going to make that guy switch positions.
One more thing. Look, and I mean, we've all been reading and listening to Michael Eaves over the last, whatever it's been, 18 hours since his post went up on Facebook, and talking about the really, really bad personality conflicts that existed within the Los Angeles Clippers. And many of those had to do with Chris Paul. I'm not going to talk about blame. I'm not going to talk about, if it's Chris's fault or Doc's fault or Austin's fault or Blake's fault. All I know is there are some very difficult personalities in that mix. And Chris demands the absolute best of everyone around him. Is James's defense going to live up to that standard? Is James Harden next to Chris Paul going to be a mesh for, I don't know, we all get along come January and February? Really? I mean, that's not the history of Chris Paul. I just think you have some potential cracks in the foundation there that have to do with function and personality and getting along.
So let's find out what they do next. If they find a way to get themselves Paul George, which is what everyone says they're pointing at, and there's even an outside chance they wind up with Carmelo Anthony, although I think that's next to impossible because I don't think Carmelo Anthony gets bought out. I think if Carmelo Anthony was going to get bought out by the Knicks, Phil Jackson would still be there. So I think that Carmelo Anthony if he's going to move, he's going to be by a trade. And I don't think the Rockets are going to trade anything for Carmelo.
If they buy out Carmelo, Greeny, I'm going to LeVar Ball walk through every set at ESPN because I've been a little defensive of Phil over the last it's actually been over the last year. The first time I was ever on TV with Stephen A. Smith, the issue we went at it over was Phil Jackson. And I feel like it's become a very easy and I'm not saying this about Stephen A. or anyone. Of course, Stephen A. is very prepared. But you don't have to show up with any notes to come on TV and be the loudest guy right now saying, Phil has to go. It's the easiest take on TV or radio. And the race is to see who can say it the most passionately. And in that process, I heard you had Jeff Van Gundy on. A lot got washed under the bridge. A, that Phil did that was okay. B, that he certainly didn't live up to this he's horrendous, worst GM in the history of sports moniker. And if the real nail in the coffin was he wanted to buy out Carmelo, and we don't want that, and then they do buy out Carmelo? I mean, what are we doing here?
But I have to stop there for a second because yes, if they buy out Carmelo, some will view it as a vindication of Phil, but it actually isn't. Phil is the one who gave him the contract and gave him the no-trade clause in the first place, and so he's trying to retroactively clean up a mess that he was not obligated to make in the first place. If the owner actually mandated that to him, Phil Jackson is a person of the stature who could say to James Dolan, if you're telling me how to do my job, then I'm not staying here. And he stayed for the money. Phil Jackson went there for the money. Phil Jackson did not put the time and the energy and the effort into this job that is required of it, that every other person in that position does. That's a fact. It's not my opinion. That is an actual fact. It's been documented in a million different places. And there is also no question that he tried to coach that team from the 8th row of the stands by forcing a triangle down the throat of no one who was interested in it at all, whether you want to say the triangle could have some functionality in the current NBA or not, which I don't know what the answer to that is. If you have the right players doing almost anything, it probably would work. But if he's trying to force a system on people that don't have any interest in running it, to me, that's not going to work. And then the public criticism of Carmelo Anthony, and then now trying to send an international public spanking to Kristaps Porzingis, which I think was actually defeating to his own purpose. Also, I think Phil Jackson screwed this thing up every way you can screw something up.
You can visually see his passion.
Yeah, no, it's jumping off the page.
Well,
It backed me down. It backed me down.
Part of it is because it does bother me to have to say it, because I love Phil Jackson. I love the guy since I was 5 years old. He's one of my favorite players. He wore number 18 on the Knicks when I was a little kid, and I loved him. Well, and then I've been around him enough to know that he's a smart guy who knows better than what happened here. He's much too smart to have let this happen if his heart was really in it. And I believe his heart wasn't in it. He just took the money. And that's really about as bad a thing as you can do in almost any circumstance.
I said that there were two versions of the way you can look at Phil's tenure, and I think Will actually agrees with neither of them, which is that either the apathy was such that he really didn't care. It was just a cash grab, and he was mailing it in, which I think if you're Phil Jackson is the narrative I would rather have people buy into than just the fact that you had a guy from a bygone era who didn't translate well into this role.
I don't buy any of that. That's right.
Who was just incompetent in his role at team president and wasn't able to operate by the own standard that he had set, because for better or for worse, Phil Jackson was going to be judged off Phil Jackson, the coach, and not any normal standard of what a president of an organization does, even one that's as crippled just by ownership as the Knicks are with James Dolan.
That's the real issue here, Junior. I mean, somehow I have become the hot take artist on this, looking for the controversial, attention-seeking position to say, no. There wasn't a conspiracy to sabotage the Knicks. Number 2, he didn't mail it in just to take his $60 million. Number 3, I won't be boxed into a position of suggesting Phil Jackson was GM of the year. And I'm saying that, yeah, he made some bad moves. At the top of the list was giving Carmelo that contract, followed by giving Noah his contract. His handling of Carmelo and Porzingis behind the scenes, it worked for Phil for a long time to play the game like this. It worked for Phil to manage personalities like this for a long time. Was it the right way to do it this time? No, probably not, because he wasn't around those guys on a daily basis to establish a relationship the way he was with the Bulls and Lakers. So when you go to the press and you trash talk them or you talk about their flaws, you can cover up for it on a daily basis when you're the coach. When you're the GM, when you're the president, you can't because you're not around them. But, Greeny, I guess I think it's rewriting the entire last 4 years. The record's not good. Jeff Van Gundy said that. I agree. The record's not good. But you will have Porzingis. You will have Hernan Gomez. You will have Ntilikina. We'll see who he turns out to be going forward. And my fear for Phil is that what will happen will be you have some kind of nucleus to build upon that will be something he put into place and will be forgotten. Just like Sam Hinkie built the Sixers and now he gets no credit for it. That's what will happen. I'm not sitting here telling you he's great, but he's certainly not the trash everyone wants to pretend like he is today.
I think the only difference there, and the reason I'm more comfortable giving Sam Hinkie that retroactive credit, is because Sam Hinkie went in there with a very clearly defined plan, and I think that's something that in Phil's role he always lacked, and that's the one thing you needed. And you mentioned there were good things that happen, but when you pull in the other direction simultaneously with the other moves that you make,
there were bad things, yes.
You brought in a couple of good young guys that would, in theory, think, okay, you could maybe have that nucleus to build around going forward now, but you supplemented that by bringing in other things to buoy what was at that point a sinking ship. And I think when you undercut yourself like that, you remove for me the idea that you were somehow the intentional architect of what would be success going forward.
Absolutely. By the way, Sam Hinkie did a much more masterful job than Phil Jackson ever did. Look, I want to be self-aware with you, and especially with your passion. And I have to ask myself, Will, why are you taking this position? Because the potential upside is actually very low. Like, what am I arguing for? He wasn't that bad. Like, what do I win if I win that debate? And I know that when I see everyone agree on something, my antennas go up instinctually to go, something's wrong. Because unanimous agreement says to me that there's a flaw here. And I know that that's guiding me to some extent on this. But I can't let that, because that's just being reactionary for reactionary's sake. But I know this, that the glee and the celebration over Phil Jackson's firing at the very least is utterly and totally misplaced. The one constant in the New York Knicks problems is James Dolan. It has been for, what are we looking at, 17 years?
It's about right.
1999, and they have the 4th worst record in the NBA over that time. They've gone through 8 executives and 11 coaches. He is the one constant, and when the one constant is at the top of your organization, it isn't hard to pin the blame.
I don't disagree with that at all, but I don't think both can't be true. James Dolan, from the time he has taken over the Knicks, and he took over a team that had been in the NBA Finals the year before, they have the fewest playoff wins and the most coaches. That's a recipe for it's an express train to stinking. I totally get it, and he is absolutely the problem. That doesn't mean that Phil Jackson didn't do a terrible job. And to the final thing that you said, I would say there's a much better chance that Hernan Gomez winds up being a rotation player in the NBA than that he becomes a star. And I'd say there's a much better chance that players drafted after this French kid the Knicks just took, whose name no one can pronounce, like Malik Monk and Zach Collins.
Don't forget Dennis Smith, please, because I'm a Mavericks
fan. Dennis Smith, who, I mean, when last seen, has like the greatest highlight dunk that you've ever seen in your entire life. There is a much better chance that at least one of those players winds up being a better NBA player than this guy than there is that this guy's going to wind up being a star. And when you hear that they drafted him because of his fit into the triangle, that's the kind of thing that really upsets a lot of people, because it just doesn't make any sense.
I just feel like, again, what we've done is we've already decided Phil's incompetent and or sabotaging, and then you back engineer that onto Ntilikina. As a Mavericks fan who was drafting 9th, right behind the Knicks at 8, I know that the Mavs had very serious interest in Ntilikina, and the Mavs don't run the triangle. I know that kid has potential that many, many teams were interested in, and it's not just because he somehow was running the triangle in France.
Listen, stand by. Hold on. I just got this. I'm going to use this as like breaking news. Mike and Mike, Will Cain is here with the Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless, best phones, best networks, no contract. Stephen A. just tweeted at us. Hold on. He just tweeted, update Greeny. Found out last night, Melo would accept buyout to go to Cavs. To Houston Rockets would have to be by trade. So that's Stephen A. Smith tweeting, there's 9:12. It's 3 minutes ago. Greeny, found out last night Melo would accept a buyout to go to the Cavs, too. to the Rockets would possibly be via trade. So here's the bottom line of it. What does a buyout mean? And Stephen A., just someone call him because I need to ask him this question. By buyout, does that mean give me my whole $54 million and I'll go? That's one thing. Is there some lesser amount of money he would take for the opportunity to go to Cleveland and play with LeBron, which I think is a great fit. I know a lot of people don't think it's a great fit. Will Cain, I think Carmelo to Cleveland is an excellent fit.
Yeah, if you're lining up the potential fits for Carmelo, I think the Cavs have to be number one. Just running through it in my head, we've heard rumors of the Sixers, which makes absolutely zero sense to me. I would not, if I were running the Sixers, want Carmelo on that team. We've heard rumor of the Wizards. Wall, Beal. What number is Carmelo if he's in the Wizards? The number 2 option? 3 option?
Offensively?
Yeah.
Well, on any team he goes to, he's the number 1 scoring option. That's the reality. But that is. He's the number 1 scoring option.
In his own mind or in actuality?
That's what I mean. You can't. Carmelo Anthony isn't going anywhere, and when you throw him the ball, his first instinct is not going to be to try and score it. That's his game. That's his mentality. That's all he does.
Well, then that's all the more reason why this won't work, because if you were telling me he'd accept a buyout to go to Cleveland and he sees himself as anything but the third banana on that team, you're going to be the thing that sinks the ship.
Well, you can be any number of banana you want in the overall total picture of things, but when it comes purely to scoring,
you're on the banana boat.
He's the best pure scorer of that group. I mean,
I disagree.
Who's a better
Kyrie
pure
Irving?
scorer?
Kyrie Irving might be the best pure scorer in the NBA. He is definitely at this point in time better than Carmelo.
Well, Stephen A. Carmelo can score as many different ways. Let's find out. Here's Stephen A. Steve, I know you're on vacation, but you're sitting there with the Twitter, so we thought that we would jump in here. We got Will Cain, we got Mike Golic Jr. Thanks for calling in, Steve. How you doing?
What's going on, fellas? How y'all doing?
Well, I needed to, because we just read your tweet on the air, and I need to ask you a follow-up question to it, and there'll probably be others.
Sure.
Which is, when you say Carmelo would accept a buyout to go to Cleveland, are you talking about accepting less than the whole $54 million that he is owed? You're saying he would take some of that money. Yeah, go ahead.
Correct. I'm not saying it's a lot less, but I've learned that he's made it very, very clear that the one team that he would accept the buyout for is Cleveland. Definitely so. And I've also heard that the Knicks are aware that he wants out, that now is the time that he needs to be gone. So they're definitely entertaining something. Obviously, Phil Jackson and James Dolan were on a different page in terms of what it would require in order for him to be gone, because Dolan loves the guy and wants him to stay. But he has reached a point where he believes it's time that he needs to go. It just has to be the right situation. But I learned from some league sources that he's made it very, very clear that when we talk buyout, think Cleveland Cavaliers, because obviously with a buyout, you're talking about taking less. And that's the one team he would take less for. That may not necessarily be the case with Houston. In order for Houston to get something done, it would probably require a trade. But he would definitely accept the buyout to go to Cleveland. But this is Carmelo Anthony we're talking about here. He might take less, but it ain't going to be a lot less.
Stephen A., not to rehash our debate from yesterday, but I'm just trying to reconcile the news, and you are certainly someone who's always at the forefront of news in the NBA, and especially with Carmelo. Help me understand, then, if we are to believe that a potential Carmelo buyout was the relationship ender for James Dolan and Phil Jackson. And, of course, there's a lot of history there. We don't have to go through everything that potentially ruined that relationship. But that was reportedly, as of yesterday, the nail in the coffin for Phil. How are we sitting here today where the Knicks are still in a position to consider a buyout? If Carmelo wanted it and Phil wanted it, why did that end the relationship?
Well, you got to remember that to me, I wasn't the one that said that was the nail in the coffin, because if you recall, it was Porzingis obviously making his feelings known, refusing to show up for the exit interview, not returning Phil Jackson's phone call, Phil Jackson ultimately bringing heat upon himself and the organization by taking phone calls in regards to Porzingis potentially being traded. All of those things played a role. It certainly wasn't just Carmelo, because if it were Carmelo, then Phil would have been gone months ago, or Carmelo would have been traded months ago, because that's how bad that relationship had gotten throughout the season, as we all know. But in terms of what's going on now, them being on the same page and, considering the buyout, you got to remember, Phil wanted the buyout. Melo didn't mind being bought out. That doesn't mean it's something that James Dolan wanted to do. So there's going to take some convincing towards James Dolan in order for this to get done, because if James Dolan says no, then it can't happen because Carmelo Anthony is still locked in. But James Dolan and Carmelo Anthony have a good enough relationship where they communicate directly, where if Carmelo makes it very, very clear that that's something he wants, it will at least be strongly considered by James Dolan. And I'm told that's exactly what Carmelo Anthony has done. He's let them know that this is something that he believes it's time to get done for him to be going for the New York Knicks.
And so let's read the tea leaves here, because, Stephen A., the whole thing is starting to come together. And you were one of the first people, if not the first, to be ahead of the big three coming together in Miami. So you could just sort of see the way this is playing. Carmelo gets himself bought out. And that means that at this time next year, he can go wherever he wants. LeBron can go wherever he wants. Wade can go wherever he wants. And Chris Paul worked this thing out so he can go wherever he wants. Those four guys are going to be somewhere together in 2018, aren't they?
I'm not sure about that. I'm really not. I think that I can foresee, see D Wade and LeBron ending up together and Melo and CP3 ending up together in Houston. That's something that I reported yesterday in terms of, their interest. Carmelo Anthony is definitely interested in going to Houston if he cannot end up in Cleveland. It doesn't necessarily mean that Cleveland is his first choice. He's going to think about his business first. He's going to think about his money, and he's going to think about what's the most viable opportunity available to him. But those are the two teams on his radar at this particular moment in time that I'm told he views as plausible, either Cleveland or Houston. It remains to be seen what will happen. But, you sort of saw the tea leaves when you learned that Chris Paul had told the Los Angeles Clippers, I'm leaving for Houston, whether you like it or not. So if you want to make something happen, you better get a trade done with them, because if you don't, then I'm going to leave and you're not going to get anything in return. So the Clippers had to make that deal. Chris Paul, everybody talks about, D Wade and LeBron being so close. Chris Paul and Carmelo Anthony are incredibly close. They're very, very close. And the first thing that I heard once it was official that Chris Paul was going to Houston, within 30 minutes, I learned that Carmelo Anthony was on the Houston Rockets' radar, because that's what they were talking about, their own version of Big Three in Melo, Chris Paul, and James Harden in Houston. Obviously, it takes a lot more to get things done with Melo, and you can blame Melo to some degree for that. Remember, when I broke the story in 2010 that LeBron was going to South Beach, one of the things that I reminded everybody of, it was never supposed to be Bosh, D. Wade, and LeBron. It was supposed to be LeBron, D. Wade, and Melo. But Melo, 3 years earlier, had decided to take the 5-year deal as opposed to the 3-year deal, and then opt out in 2010 because he wanted his $80 million guaranteed from Denver. He didn't want to take the chance of, opting out and seeing what happens. And that's why he didn't end up in Miami, which is why ultimately he tried to get to New York. Now you find yourself in a different scenario where CP3 is free and free to join James Harden. But once again, Melo needs the assistance of the team he plays for in order to get things done, because Melo wanted that $124 million contract. So that's what the situation is right now. It's a challenge to get things done, and who knows what's going to happen. Some other teams can come into the mix as well. But as of yesterday, I'm telling you that Cleveland and Houston are the teams on Carmelo Anthony's radar, according to numerous league sources, and it's pretty locked in that regard. Cleveland and Houston, unless something else develops, and I don't know what that could be at this particular moment in time.
All right, he's Stephen A., and we're just never going to let him rest. Go back to your vacation. Thank you very much, Steve, for jumping. I really appreciate it. He tweeted at us, and I needed to get some answers, and we wound up getting a lot more than even I expected. Go ahead, Will.
Just to not bury, quick. Yeah, not to bury the lead here, but it's no mistake that he calls in during my segment with you and eats up all my time. That's what that was about.
Will Cain, thank you. Here she is, the star of the Six. Jemele Hill has made her way here with a fantastic T-shirt. I mean, Ice Cube is like the most. That movie was on. She's got a T-shirt from Boys in the Hood, and then when I saw it, I remember the movie from the theaters, and obviously I loved it when you guys did the parody of the climactic final
my 40
scene,
drinking was superb,
which was tremendous.
That was maybe the best 40 drinking in the history of this network and probably any network.
I had practice, so it was good.
But if someone had told you when NWA first burst onto the scene, that guy is going to have the most diverse professional resume of any entertainer in Hollywood, which I think you could argue right now he does. Now he's running the 3-on-3 basketball league and everything. I mean, it's remarkable what he's doing.
That was an interesting transition to see Cube go from Obviously, his role as a performer and as an artist to being, Are We There Yet? I think that's the name of the movie. To be making kids movies. Like, if you would have told me Ice Cube was going to go on to do that, making family movies, I just would have thought you were completely crazy.
I mean, you brought him up earlier this morning.
I always said it's going to be the wildest thing that they're going to be a generation of kids that only know him as that. Like that's like that's the guy from Ride Along, or that's the guy from Are We There Yet, or that's the guy who was the angry black police chief from 21 Jump Street.
Right.
Like, it's all of these things that just run so counter to what the rest of us were used to for a while.
There's wild times. Welcome to 2017.
All right, let's jump into everything here. We just had Stephen A. on. I'm not sure if you had a chance to hear it, but he was talking about Carmelo would be willing to take a buyout to go to Cleveland. Not so much for Houston. That would have to be a trade. But he was saying Melo and Chris Paul are that kind of close. And from basically the instant Chris Paul got himself to Houston, the conversation about Carmelo started heating up. So what is your big picture sense? Let's start with this. Carmelo to Cleveland, Carmelo to Houston. Which to you is the better fit and the more significant threat to Golden State?
I would probably say Carmelo to Cleveland. And look, LeBron James, I mean, as we know, he's still in the prime of his career. I think that he will bring out something in Melo, like some of the criticisms Melo has faced throughout his career. We know he's a dynamic offensive player, but in terms of being a complete player and maybe even being to some degree for the first time in his career, if they played together, a role player, if you will, I think that's a really good fit for him. But I'm just still not sure, like as much as we've been fantasizing about the Banana Boat brothers coming together, I'm not sure if they all do that means that they win a title. And even if some fragmented section of the Banana Boat brothers wind up together, while again entertaining, would be a must watch every night, I don't see that being enough to beat Golden State either. Because look, Carmelo, he's a half court player in the sense that like he slows the game down. He's not a pace player. Golden State, they force you to play their pace, and we know what they can do defensively. They're one of the best defensive teams in the league. They have 2 MVPs. Like, it's going to take a lot to beat them, and I just don't know if any of these combinations work to beat them.
Yeah, now we know the best version of Carmelo that we've seen is usually Carmelo in the Olympics, and that's one that he's got that experience, I think, being less than the number one scorer mentality and all that, and that's what LeBron can get out of him, because I'm with you. I think the only chance we've got at significant change here, because Chris Paul and Harden kind of cancel each other out in the way we've talked about, at least as a pairing. You add him to Cleveland, and they're the closest to Golden State. They're the most Golden State tangent. Everyone else is trying to climb over San Antonio and Cleveland first to even get a shot at that.
Right. And the other thing, too, is we have to be real. Carmelo, that Olympic player we've seen, he's not that player anymore. He's kind of on the decline, still effective. So I'm not trying to put him out the pasture necessarily, but it kind of feels like the Mayweather Pacquiao fight. It just happened a couple years too late. Would have loved to see this 3 or 4 years ago. And LeBron, it was interesting because I asked my co-host Michael Smith this. What has been a more impactful on the NBA? Golden State coming together the way they have, signing Kevin Durant specifically, or LeBron James and the way he conducts his business? And LeBron had this plan in mind years ago of always being able to control his destiny. He got Wade on board. That's how they all got to Miami. They tried to get Carmelo on board to do that, and I feel like he missed his opportunity and his window then. Because had the Banana Boat brothers happen 3 or 4 years ago, then we'd be talking about something else entirely.
Yeah, it would be like 7 years ago now if he had gone down there in the first place, and we'll see. Mike and Mike, Jemele Hill is here with us. Mike and Jemele, the Sports Center at 6 every single night. The Straight Talk brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless, best phones, best networks, no contracts. Okay, so I'm going to make an analogy that I think will be very near and dear to your youthful heart.
Okay.
Carmelo Anthony could go to Cleveland and be the microwave. That's what he could be in Cleveland. For those who don't remember the Bad Boys Pistons, people don't remember the Bad Boys Pistons as romantically, and for a lot of reasons.
Man, Vinnie Johnson, yeah.
But Vinnie Johnson coming off the bench, he was instant offense. Before that was an expression. So I'm not saying Carmelo has to come off the bench, but I'm saying there are those spots when LeBron James sits down and they all of a sudden forget how to play basketball. You give the ball to Carmelo and get out of the way. And
Yeah.
I'm telling you right now, they will not score 0 points in a 3-minute stretch, and that alone might be the difference.
Yeah, and I would say the same if D Wade, if Chicago gives him a buyout, which they should. Between the Knicks and the Bulls, I realize that for James Dolan, probably wrapping your mind around paying somebody something close to $50 million or whatever a small discount may be there is probably a little tough to take. But if Chicago, it makes all the sense in the world. You want to stink. So you give D Wade this buyout because he might mess around and win you some games. You let your younger players play, and then you line yourself up for a top pick in the draft. But D Wade, it would be the same thing. Instant offense, those stretches, as you said, when LeBron sits down and they don't quite have everything together. That wouldn't happen with those two. And so while I should make this clear, I think that if he got D Wade or certainly Carmelo, they would get closer to beating Golden State. We might see that 7-game series. I just still don't think that it's necessarily enough because people have to look at what they got from Deron Williams, which is basically nothing. So you mean to tell me Carmelo and D Wade in that role or in that position wouldn't give them something? They give them a lot. D Wade still averaged 18 a game.
And with Cleveland, you've got the advantage of being able to prioritize that postseason health. They're not going to need Dwayne Wade to go out there and really give them anything in the regular season. They can get there without him. It's just plugging 1-minute gaps if you're Cleveland. And I think if you add Dwayne Wade, it still gives you room fit-wise to get someone else on the court who can give you that wing defense where they really lacked, where we really saw them get exploited by Golden State. And listen, Dwayne Wade on his best day, if the knees stay healthy and everything else, can give you some semblance of defense in that backcourt too.
In the big picture, last question for you here, and for those who didn't get a chance to see you and Mike's take on it last night. When we look back on Phil Jackson's tenure running the New York Knicks, is there anything defensible in it? Will Cain and I just had an argument. I won't even prejudice the jury by mentioning Porzingis. Do you feel inclined to defend it at all against the onslaught of criticism that he has received?
No, and when he first got to the Knicks, I knew it was a mistake from the beginning because it just never seemed to me that Phil Jackson really was invested in the job. It requires a different level of commitment than a coach, a different level of overseeing how you do things. And I know Phil wanted to create a certain type of culture, but it's hard to create that culture when you're kind of there, you're in and out. Like you have to commit to it. And the fact that when he was first offered the job, the offer sat so long, it just felt like something that he felt like he needed to do to prove that he could be an architect. And look, I know that there's going to be a lot of temptation for people to look at what he did or didn't do, rather, in an executive role and sort of attach that to his legacy as a coach, because there was always this question about whether Phil Jackson was really a coach or did he always just have the best players. He's faced that his whole career. But I think it's just a matter of knowing what you do best at. And knowing that there are some things you're not good at. There are some roles on television I'm not good at. People might say I'm not very good on the six. That's fine. But like there are certain things in TV I know I can't do. That doesn't mean I'm a terrible TV person across the board. Being an executive is just not Phil's thing. And unfortunately for him, he is the latest line of people that go to the Knicks who have these reputations that seem above reproach in basketball. And by the time they leave there, you can't even believe they know anything about basketball.
And to Jemele's point, culture is a word that gets brought up a ton in sports, and it's one of those things that's hard to put your finger on, but the one thing you need if you're going to have successful, whatever your culture is buy-in with your star player. And whether you're a coach or an executive, that's the one thing, regardless of how good the guys Phil had around him, he made it work. He gelled with those guys, and he had their trust. There was never trust with Carmelo. There was never that buy-in, and when you can't have that from the beginning, and now with Kristaps, who is going to be your last-ditch effort at that at the end, you have nothing.
Sometimes it's about patience, too. Like for example, I was at the BET Awards weekend last weekend, and Mike and I were the announcing team for the BET Celebrity Game, which actually airs tonight, I think. And they had a concert Saturday night. It was Migos, I think Gucci Mane, A$AP Rocky. And I can just imagine right now, Greeny is looking at me like, who the hell are these people? To some degree. But as much as I like the Migos music and I like Gucci Mane, I'm not going to that concert. Like, I'm grown. Like, I'm a grown woman. Like, I'm not going to sit up there with little 17 and 18-year-olds. That's a bad mix. I would be cranky and not having a good time hanging around those people. And Phil didn't realize that the game, in many respects, had passed him by. Like, he's too old to be in an executive role because he's too cranky. That's why he's way way overly honest about Carmelo. That's why it was doomed to not work.
Phil Jackson is Joe Budden in a Migos concert right now.
See what I'm saying? Yeah. Right? He's getting up and walking off like, I don't have time for this right now.
First of all, I know exactly who Gucci Mane is. And second of all, and more significantly,
Gucci's my boy.
I'm not even going to excuse him on that front because Pat Riley is just as old as he is, but he is completely invested.
Totally.
He cares and he wants it. Phil Jackson took the money because he just couldn't turn it down. He never wanted any part of this, and to me, that's even worse. I'm way late. Jemele and Mike, tonight, every night, Sports Center the 6. Thanks so much. Always a pleasure to see you.
Okay, Kevin, for the grand prize of $1 million. What color is the White House?
I know this.
5 seconds.
Oh, switching to Geico could save you a bunch of money on car insurance?
Okay. Judges? That's true, Kevin. They'll allow it. Congratulations. You're a winner.
Woo! Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
Our friend Linda Cohn is listening, and she tweeted at us, why would Melo go to Houston if Mike D'Antoni is coaching there? Have you forgotten the history in New York? That is certainly worth putting into the conversation. D'Antoni and Carmelo did not see eye to eye at all when D'Antoni was coaching the Knicks, and pretty much everyone looks back on that as a situation in which Carmelo essentially got D'Antoni run out of town. So could they coexist through that? Listen, how do I know? I mean, people have made up, through other issues in the past, and maybe they find a way to make that work.
And I think that would be my point. Like, at some point as a professional, and a lot of the things in New York, to Will's point earlier, have been lumped onto Phil Jackson and that staff there, but some of it is also on the players. Kristaps Porzingis should have just showed up to that exit meeting. It's an easy way to get yourself out of some of the blame in all of this and just do your job in that sense. So at some point, Carmelo Anthony and Mike D'Antoni would have to look at this and say, if we think this makes our team better, if this gives us a legit chance to win a title in this league, then why can we not put this aside and be adults about it?
All right. I want to mention one other thing here quickly before we run, and that is that the Dan Le Batard Show has one of their polls up, and anyone who knows Dan's show knows that they put polls up on almost everything. And I think I was the one who brought this up, but they have a poll up, who would win in a fight between Greeny and Stu Gatz? I'm going to vote for Stu Gatz right now. I want to make it 100% clear, and I will retweet that. I don't pretend I can win a fight with anyone, Stu Gatz or otherwise. In fact, Stu Gatz probably would be a terrible person for me to fight because he'd fight dirty. And I'm not good in a fight against anyone. It's clean. I'm particularly going to be bad in a fight against someone dirty.
Stu Gatz would be almost like the Shooter McGavin to your Happy Gilmore. I feel like he'd pay someone to run you over in the middle of the round or in some way slight you before the battle even starts.
That's exactly right. So I have cast my vote. I have voted for Stu Gatz.
It's overwhelming.
There are almost no other things in the world I think he'd beat me at, but that is one of them. Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance, our guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. I'd like to quickly mention one more time. Tonight, 9 Eastern, 8 Central on ABC. If you have some time, I hope you'll watch Battle of the Network Stars. It was so much fun to do. Joe Tessitore and I hosted together. Cassidy Hubbarth and Carrie Champion from ESPN are on. The coaches are Ronda Rousey and DeMarcus Ware. Huge stars in the first episode. Current ones like from High School Musical and Modern Family to classic ones from shows like Full House and Facts of Life. So I hope you watch. It's tonight, 9 Eastern, 8 Central on ABC. And Mike, go ahead.
If I promise to watch and bring a friend to watch, do I still have to watch Hoosiers this weekend?
Yes, I want you to watch Hoosiers, and I want a report. I want a full report on how on the scenes that made you cry, because there will be multiple.
All 0 of them. Can't wait. It'll be an easy report.
Hey, thanks, my friend. Great work today.
A lot of
fun.
This
was so much fun. The big fella back and better than ever tomorrow. See you then. Mike and Mike.